Hello, my name is Garrett Franks, host of The Crimson Standard, a podcast where we examine the past, present, and future of Alabama athletics. On this episode, we talked to former Alabama great Javier Arenas. We all have athletes that we view as heroes growing up. Some choose a player based on position, play style, or they're from your hometown. Mine was based on height. Growing up as a small kid in Birmingham, Alabama, there wasn't a pro team to watch. There was only Alabama football. Upon watching the Crimson Tide, there was a player who caught my attention from the very beginning, that being Javier Arenas. Arenas was a 5'9" cornerback and punt returner from the Tide from 2006 to 2009. He was always known as a spark in the bottle who could dazzle defenders and confuse opposing quarterbacks, but he was much more than that. Arenas was born in Tampa, Florida on October 28, 1987.
It sounds cliche, but right, the bad area of town, like right near downtown. Till I was about 8, and then we moved to South Tampa, which is, probably from a lot of outsider perspective, it's, South Tampa is blossoming, one of the largest areas in the country in terms of the rate that people are moving down here at. But it's still, when I was growing up here, it wasn't like that.
Though he didn't have much, he and his family moved to a little bit better part of Tampa, that being South Tampa when he was 8 years old. At that moment, that's when he started picking up a football and realized what he possibly could become.
I picked up a football when I moved to South Tampa. Played for the Little League team down here, which is where I met a lot of friends that I still have to this day. But it's where I developed, my hunger for football, in a sense that I didn't have much outside of football. Couldn't sleep the night before Little League games, wake up at 4 a.m. on Fridays before going to school to watch Inside the NFL.
Once Arenas got to high school, that being Robinson High School, he and his brother quickly started to show out. Once he started showing out, the offer started coming.
I could play corner, that's for sure. And then my brother graduated, and I moved to receiver and return kicks, and it was easy. Everything else was just easy, even against good teams like Jesuit High School down here. I scored 5 touchdowns. It was just easy. So at that point in my head, I thought, I could play, college football. But it was aided. That thought was aided by FAMU, Bethune-Cookman, Florida Atlantic, Florida International coming in and showing interest in me. But that thought was solidified when Dave Unger, the special teams coach, Bama, came down and watched me play. And at that point, I'm like, all right, I guess I can play. I can play big time.
Arenas' recruitment wasn't your stereotypical visits in the summer, commits in August, and plays his season committed to his team. Being such a late bloomer in the high school scene, he didn't really have the privilege or opportunity to kind of drag it out, visit throughout the summer. His recruitment really started in October after he started shining at Robinson High School. At one point, Arenas was committed to 2 separate teams who are rivals, that being FAU and FIU. And then the Crimson Tide got involved. And once the Crimson Tide got involved, it was all history. Atlantic
was the first school that became interested. Them gained a little interest in me, and they flew me down there. First time being on the flight, and it was amazing. It was amazing. But I committed. Came back home. I guess I gained a little steam when I visited there, and Florida International flew me. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they flew me down as well a couple of weekends later and showed me the works. It wasn't as glamorous as FAU, but it was an opportunity. So I committed there too, and came back, and then that's kind of when Bama came in. All this happened within a month, and I signed with Bama. I committed to Bama a week before signing day, and the rest is history. So it was short-lived. I came up and visited Bama after I committed. Didn't go out. Didn't need to go out. Didn't need to see it. Wasn't there for anything else but to play football. I think that's telling of the type of player that I was. Football was all that mattered.
It didn't take long for Arenas to impress then head coach Mike Shula. He impressed him so much that he was starting day one as a true freshman. He was starting, but it wasn't necessarily the position he wanted to be. Coming in as a true DB, he wanted to be on the defense, he wanted to be reading quarterbacks' eyes, he wanted to be doing all that. But instead, he was put at special teams, and that's where Arenas truly shined. The 2006 season was very kind to Arenas. He had 31 returns, 286 yards, averaging about 9 yards each return with 2 touchdowns, and one of those touchdowns coming in a big game against LSU.
And I had one job, and that was to catch the ball, because Dave Unker was such a good coach, old school coach. He'd get in your butt if you didn't do it. And I went out there, like for example, my freshman year I played in Florida. That was the first time that I started, and people from Tampa came up to watch, and they probably was thinking in their head, man, this guy, look at this opportunity that this guy has. And I was thinking, man, just catch the ball.
Though Arenas personally had a really successful freshman year, the 2006 season was not a kind one to the Crimson Tide. They went 6-7, and of course losing to their rivals in the Iron Bowl, Auburn. Though head coach Mike Shula had helped the program through a really rough time with NCAA issues, it was time for a change. That change came in form of head coach Nick Saban. The former LSU head coach was looking for a new challenge as he had just wrapped up his second season at the Miami Dolphins, where he just didn't like the NFL. He wasn't able to sign the players he wanted. The players were getting paid more than him. He felt as if he had to play players due to salary cap issues. It just wasn't a fit for him. He decided to come back to college, and after a long head coaching search by then AD Mal Moore, Nick Saban was chosen. He came on a plane in 2007 and changed the state forever. When Saban took over, there were a lot of changes that needed to be made. Obviously, the personnel wasn't up to snuff, but also it was a locker room issue. They just didn't have the mentality that you would associate with an Alabama team of now. In my conversation with Arenas, he made it sound as if some players had buyer's remorse of even coming to Alabama because it was just that brutal of a change from Shula to Saban.
What do we get ourselves into? But it was also, too, just don't mess up. Don't mess up. And I think, don't mess up. Don't be late for class. I got to finish these 110s. I gotta reroute this receiver and, stop the ball in the flats or be underneath the ball on the 7 cut. He forced us to be in the moment every step of the way.
During this time of transition and upheaval, there's a song from the 60s that it made me think of. The Times They Are A-Changing by Bob Dylan. It was a song, in the context of that time in 1964, civil rights was happening. So much was changing with the Vietnam War. Just a lot was going on in America. Similar to Alabama at that time, and to also in 2007, a lot was changing. In the Times at Alabama, and specifically in the Mal Moore Center, the times were changing.
Coach Shula, guys would be a little lackadaisical during the offseason because they know the season was so far away. Well, in the offseason with Coach Saban, we got XXX to get done this week. We better get it done. So I think that with Saban that first year, it was like, again, we were always in the moment because if you wasn't in the moment, you wasn't going to get accomplished what you needed to get accomplished that day or that week or that quarter of the off season, and you might not be on the team anymore.
Though the 2007 season was very similar to the 2006 season, that being was very underwhelming, but the 2006 season, they didn't win their bowl game. 2007, they won their bowl game in the Independence Bowl once again. This time they beat Colorado. Once again, Arenas had a great season in 2007, scoring 1 touchdown from punt return with over 300 yards, and he was starting to get some reps at DB. He started 12 games, getting 20 tackles and getting 2 tackles for loss. But it was really that 2008 season where everything came together. Alabama went 12-0 for the first time since 1992, and Alabama made it the SEC championship game since the first time since the early 2000s. It was a big deal, and obviously the team was really excited. The next 2 games didn't go as planned. They lost to Florida in an ugly game, and then they played the Utah Utes. Alabama ended up playing against a really talented Mountain West team that utterly obliterated them. It wasn't even that close a game. The scoreline, I believe, was 31-17, but in actuality, if you watch the game, it wasn't very close. But it did lead to a highlight reel play that, for me as a 7-year-old kid, was incredible.
It was awesome. That touchdown came off sheer mentality and not wanting to be denied. I don't know what point it was in my career, but the thought popped in my head after a punt return. And it was like one of those punt returns where I barely got tackled or tripped or fell or lost my balance. Mm-hmm. But I thought in my head, I was like they not really trying to tackle me. Like, yeah, they wrapping up, they flying down here, but they not really trying to tackle me. Like, I could stay up a lot more often than I am. And what you saw there in 2008 in the Sugar Bowl was me fully embodying that thought.
Arenas had just finished his third season at the University of Alabama. That means he could have declared for the NFL draft, something he wasn't even thinking of. But after the game, Coach Saban pulled him aside to talk to him.
Yeah. Well, that conversation had been had in 2008 in the Sugar Bowl after the game in the Saints locker room. Coach Saban called me in. And again, I was a junior in 2008. And he said, and this is a kid, I told you, my mentality, I was in the moment. What's next? How do I maximize what I'm doing now? And after the game, he called me and he said, I think you should stay for another year. And it threw me off. I'm like, what else would I do? He's like, I don't think you should enter the draft. I'm like, that never crossed my mind.
Throughout my entire conversation with Javier, there was one thing that really stood out to me. He kept saying this phrase that was uttered throughout the entire locker room: "We will not be denied." He kept saying it throughout whether it was high school to his NFL career to beyond. He kept talking about it. And so when it came to that 2009 season, I asked him, I was like, what was the difference to that team? What moment did y'all kind of realize, hey, this team is special, this team can run the table, go 14-0, and eventually win a national championship against Texas? He brought up a game that, personally for me, I hold very near and dear to my heart. That was the 2009 Rocky Block game against Tennessee, where Alabama won 12-10. They ended up beating a Lane Kiffin-coached Tennessee team on a last-second field goal. The reason why I hold some personal connection to the game, my dad was actually on the sideline of the game and was able to be one of the first people to hug Mount Cody after Terrence Cody blocked that kick to win the game. He was on the sideline doing audio work for the team. But it was kind of shocking to hear that late in the season, like, okay, yeah, this team can do something like that. You usually would think you would hear it at the very beginning of the season, like maybe week 2 or 3, but no, that was week 7.
After the Tennessee game, after we blocked that kick, because we blocked that kick, the phrase for that year was "won't be denied." And you got to imagine being out there on defense, being down by, I think it was 2 points, them being what they were as an offense on the field in the fourth quarter, and us being on defense, looking behind us, seeing how attainable that field goal was for that Tennessee kicker. And one would just pack it up, right, and say, they going to make this, they got this. Well, no, we saw it as an opportunity to still win the game. And, again, I'm explaining that after the Tennessee game is when we realized we can win it. But more specifically, it was before that kick in the huddle when Rolando McClain, he gathered us and said, when we go back and we look at the tape, if one person not selling out, excuse my French, but I'm going to whoop your ass.
Yeah.
And I always tell people, when you see that painting of all of us diving, one diving necessarily block the kick. We trying to avoid ass whooping from Rolando. But my point is, that kick would have been blocked by 2 or 3 guys had Cody not gotten to it. So no matter how dire the situation was, we realized that we could still go take it. You know what I mean? We still had the power to go take it in any phase of the game. So after that Tennessee game is when I think we realized, that we can go win the title.
And they did win that title. Alabama defeated Texas 37-21 in the 2009 Rose Bowl to win the national championship, to win their first national championship since 1992, bringing home number 13. With all of his eligibility exhausted, it was time for him to go to the NFL draft. Javier Arenas was selected in the 50th overall in the second round in the NFL draft to the Kansas City Chiefs. Throughout his career, he kind of was an NFL journeyman. Spent about 6 years in the league, went to about 5 different teams, spending most of his time in either Atlanta or Kansas City. And it was kind of heartbreaking growing up idolizing the guy and hear how he kind of talked about how his career turned out. Objectively, from our point of view, we view 5 years in the NFL pretty good, that you can get pensioned, you get to play in the NFL, and as you hear later, he had some cool stories throughout the NFL. He had 2 interceptions, played on Monday Night Football. I mean, kind of the dream that every kid in America grows up feeling, but he looked back at it with a little bit of regret.
I think my career, I won't use the word failure, but it wasn't a good career at all. I had the opportunity to play there, but I'm at the point in my life now, and how I dealt with that when I first finished playing in the NFL, I didn't think about it. I didn't think about, how my NFL career went. But now at this point, when I think back about it, I'm fully mature, and I understand that, God takes us through things for a reason. Anything, you know what I mean? Whatever happens, you can always gain from it. One way is, it ain't much that can stop you in terms of if you do something and you don't do it the right way, or you don't have much success doing it, life goes on. I'm not going to carry it into my next venture. So it helped me. That experience, being what it was, it helped me. It made me stronger. It helped me deal with adversity. So yeah, I didn't think I had a great career. I made it there though. I played there, and I made some plays up there too. But I learned a lot from it, and I'm thankful for that.
I wouldn't call it a failure, but I wouldn't call it a good career. That is what Javier Arenas said about his 6-year NFL career, and it's kind of heartbreaking. Someone who grew up admiring the guy, grew up modeling his own game after him, grew up wearing his number for middle school and Pee Wee, and then eventually through JV. That broke my heart, honestly. Like, it was, when you do stuff like this, and you do journalism, you try to detach any type of emotional investment, any type of fanhood at all. But for Javier specifically, it was hard just because of how much nostalgia and attachment I have to what he gave me. I wouldn't be the football fan. I wouldn't be the football writer. I wouldn't be the football, I guess talking head, if you want to call it that I would be today without Javier Arenas. Because without Javier Arenas, I don't get into college football. And to hear him say that about his career was heartbreaking. It made me sad. But I think that also sets Javier apart from many people. It sets him apart from me, definitely. Because if I had a 5-year NFL career, I'd be like, heck yeah, 5-year NFL career. I'd be talking about it. If I had any bling from it, I'd be showing it off. But that's not how Javier works. Javier would only settle for probably being the greatest of all time. That's how he wants to be remembered, a great NFL player. And, you look at his stats, you can't really say he was a great NFL player, but you can definitely say he was a good, solid, reliable NFL player, and that's not good enough for him. And I think that differentiates him from many other people in society today, or just not just society, but even just college football or NFL, is that what differentiates guys from being just a good athlete to being a professional football player is that competitive drive. And the fact that he has that, is it kind of sometimes feels like you're listening to Saban talk through him. You can see that Alabama swagger, that Alabama confidence, that Alabama standard he sets. And dare I say the Crimson standard, just, plugging us a little bit. Dare I say the Crimson standard that he sets within himself. It's impressive. It's not only something I admire and want to see in myself when it comes to my own work, but I think it's just applicable to all folks today that, we should have that drive. We should have that push to want to be the best at what we do. And to see that is through Javier is something that's really interesting. Of course, I had to ask, what was like his favorite moment in the NFL? And the answer he gave me, he kind of gave me two answers, but the two answers he gave me did not disappoint. It was something that you just have to listen to.
When we played Peyton Manning and he was playing with the Broncos, he came up to me after the game, and he said, Arenas, he came and found me. He was like, you're a hell of a player, because I had a good game. Guys like Steve Smith after the game showing me respect. I don't think my stats reflect that, obviously, but those types of things are what stand out and were the bright spots for me. It was tough for me to do that on a consistent basis. You know what I mean? Like some of the dominant players in the NFL now. And then relationships that I gained too, I think back on those as well. In that first Monday Night Football game, I did awesome on defense. I dropped the interception. And on special teams, like every time I touched the ball, I got at least 30 or 40 yards. So that moment right there, the first Monday night game, or let's say against Oakland, in Oakland, I returned a punt for a touchdown, and it got called back. Just running and breaking loose and being in the open, in the black hole, being flicked off by Raider fans as I approached the end zone. But again, it didn't count. But it didn't take away that feeling that I had in the moment. I think that that moment, honestly.
Another note that I kind of picked up on throughout our entire interview was that Javier is a deep, strong Christian. He's something that is very important to him. He talks about his faith a lot. You heard it throughout his interviews that he mentioned his faith a lot. So I asked him, I was like, where does that faith come from? Where, did that help you throughout your career? And it was really interesting that he talked about basically that, his determination was through that. He went out there kind of feeling like he was playing with house money because he was very blessed or very, had strong faith in God. And that was something that personally for me, I found very, very appealing, very, respectable that, he has that kind of that faith grounding that I think is just very personal and very raw, and something that you can only really get when you talk to these guys one-on-one.
It's just resilience, but going back to the faith, that's what makes me resilient. Just knowing that, God has a plan for me that's already written out. So I don't care how catastrophic some may be. Like honestly, man, I thought my NFL career was just bad. To me, it was catastrophic. You see guys out here, former football players, not dealing with that real well after they play. Heck, you see successful ones not dealing with it after they play. But I'm happy.
Mentioning how some athletes who maybe had successful college careers or great even high school careers and just don't make it the next level, how they kind of flame out in real life. They may get into things they shouldn't, they get into drinking, drugs, just depression because, what they did was so grand and they had this huge expectation growing up and they didn't meet it. And him talking about that was just so raw and so interesting and honestly, just as a person who likes the guy, made me happy to see that he was happy. He says, he ended up with, I'm happy, and that brought me some solitude and it just made me happy to hear that he's doing well and he's happy and he feels like he handled what in his opinion was a disappointing career. He handled that well and is using that to kind of pay it forward to others.
I train defensive backs now. I train pro guys. I train college guys. And all of that stuff that I learned from or that I gained or, had to learn from in the NFL, I apply to them to help them either avoid it or give them a leg up. But again, it's going back to me wanting to be a servant, right? And me understanding that this is exactly what I should be doing at this very moment because of what I went through. And it's just how the chips fall.
Unless you're living under a rock, we all know that college football has changed so much over the past few years. We have college football playoffs. You have playoff expansion coming. We have conference realignment, not only 2012, but now upcoming with the Big Ten, SEC, American, et cetera. We have transfer portal, NIL. And I asked Javier, it's such a fun discussion of which athletes back in the day would have made a lot of money from NIL. It's easy to say, the Tim Tebows, the Johnny Manziels, Lamar Jackson, all these guys, Reggie Bush. But I asked Javier, I was like, how would you have taken advantage of that? How would you have taken advantage of that? And his answer was really surprising me, especially because that DB culture is very flashy, very exciting, very in your face. But once again, it just sets him apart from others because that wasn't his priority.
Honestly, I would have not took advantage of it from a naive way, just because I really love football and I'm there for football. Like, say for an example, if I was a big time recruit and USC, it came down to USC or Bama, and USC said they'll give me $500,000 in LI money, and Bama just said that, look, man, you can come here. I would go to Bama just because all I can think of from a football perspective is the tradition, playing in Bryant-Denny Stadium, how it is being on campus. And I go, and people will be calling me an idiot, right? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Why didn't you take the $500,000? And I would probably at a certain point think, oh, dang, why didn't I take that money? But it would never, it's not about money is my point. So I think I would be fine. I think I would thrive. Also think I would set a trend to stick to, keep it about football. The money will come. You know what I mean? I don't think I would have been I wasn't motivated by money in the NFL at all. So that I think that's how I would have thrived in this era.
Once again, another thing I kind of mentioned earlier with setting Javier apart was the whole, I wouldn't have, if I was offered USC $500,000 in Alabama, offer me nothing, I would still go to Alabama because of the tradition. And I asked him, do kids still think this way? And, he'll respond here in a second, but, I think you're seeing the shifts of a kid who went to high school at least in 2005 from a kid who went to high school in 2023. Obviously, generations changed, priorities change. I mean, you could see the same thing in the 70s and the 90s. Just things change, and as they should, as life progresses, as technology changes, as opportunities arise. The internet obviously was not the same in 2006 and 2005 as it is in 2023. But it's really interesting to even say he doesn't think he would take advantage of it because he was just that focused into football. And it's kind of refreshing to hear that, but also, as someone, he trains high school and college players, you hear him tell a story here in a second about a kid he trains. It's really interesting to see how that's changed, see how kids' mindsets are a little bit more about brand awareness, a little bit more about treating themselves not only as football players, but as brands. Once again, I say that as someone who's 22 years old in 2023 and who, is all about that. And I think that's so interesting and such a cool way to generate revenue. But someone who's 55, who's grown up in college football, looking and being a certain way, that scares them. And that's understandable. Imagine loving something for so long, for like 50 plus years. And then it seems like within a year or two, everything's changed. It's kind of flipped on its head. It would upset you, it would upset me, it would upset a lot of people. And so I try to have sympathy for those people who maybe are against NIL or against the transfer portal or against any of this. But also we have to remember, a lot of times, Javier's case was kind of similar. He's their family's way out. He's their family's way out of a tough situation. And obviously Javier grew up in a little bit better environment than some, but still, him doing what he did, using football as a vehicle to get a college education, playing the NFL for 5 years to get pensioned, to eventually become a trainer where he's training NFL and college guys. He's the true winner out of this all because he's changed his family forever. But here's what he had to kind of say, though, about how this upcoming generation that we currently have with high schoolers is very different from his.
One of the kids that I train is a top cornerback in the country, and he, I said, hey, man, I was speaking on behalf of Bama. I was like, so what would, Bama have to do to get you? And his priority list at the top of it was NLI money. You know what I mean? So, yeah, and then when you turn, every time they turn, you want a top recruit, ask them to listen to his playlist and listen to what is being talked about on his music. Flashy jewelry, cars. So it's what they're all about. And some of them subconsciously, and some of them just want to, be flashy and stuff like that. But every time you turn around, everything you do it's about money. And so I cannot blame them, no. But it really tests your character. And to me, you can identify the real good recruits easier now based off of their what's important to them.
Not only was Javier Arenas set apart physically, coming in at 5'9" as a cornerback, but he was also set apart mentally. And I hope I did a good job of sharing his story and sharing that message through this, that he was much more than just a small guy in a football field who could run fast. He was a smart guy. He was a determined guy. He was a man who has strong faith, and just really someone that I think we all can take something from. He's someone that his story, his determination, his hard work, his faith is something we all can strive to live towards. And it was such a privilege talking to Javier once again, because he was a personal hero of mine growing up. But to be able to tell his story was just an honor and something that I'll never forget, and is definitely a bucket list thing. So thank you to Javier Arenas for allowing me to tell his story. Thank you for listening to the Crimson Standard, a podcast where we examine the past, present, and future of Alabama athletics. If you'd like to get in contact with me, please feel free to DM me on Twitter at Garrett_Franks, or you can email our email, sports@wvuafm.edu. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great day.
WVUA-FM, Tuscaloosa.